Tony Suarez, former legislator, law professor, and your host for I Need to Know, a program of the Public Trust Network and part of a movement for explanation, a crossroads between politics and law on those issues that affect the nation and in Puerto Rico. Today, our guest is the future president-elect of the Puerto Rican Bar Association of New York, Reneer Peraton. Stay with us. Reneer Peraton, buenos dias. How you doing? And thank you for joining us.
Very nice. Thank you very much for having me. And you can call me Ray. That's fine.
Ray. Okay, Ray. Thank you very much for giving your time and dedicating yourself to this. And of course, you are now the president-elect of the Puerto Rican Bar Association of New York. And that is the oldest, outside of Puerto Rico, of course, it is the oldest bar association that names itself after this group of Puerto Rican community. So it has a long history. In fact, I think you're about the 68th president, something like that. Is that?
That's correct. I'm the 68th president. Started in 1957.
That's right. So it started in the very beginning of the mass movement from Puerto Rico. Now, in my case, my grandparent left Puerto Rico in 1920. So he was there with they got le dieron derecho. You know, he said, "I'm out of here." You know,
right.
And my mother was born in New York. My father was born on the island, but he also left very early in the 1950s. He was part of the 1950s. My mother was born in 1931 in New York. So we're a couple of generations now, but still, you know, como dice la canción, somos boricua aunque nace en la luna. And so that's why the interest in this comes from. And the Puerto Rican Bar Association in New York has a storied history going back in 1957 and precisely defending the rights of Puerto Ricans. Back then, if it's difficult now, back then it was really difficult. And you had situations where you had no bilingual education, the voting ballots were not in Spanish. There was all sorts of attempts at denial of ballot access. All of this stuff was civil rights was affecting, and it was the Puerto Rican lawyers of New York. They got together and realized this need. This is well before Latino justice, what is now called Latino justice, back then was called the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund. But before the NAAC of Puerto Ricans was born the Puerto Rican Bar Association of New York. So it has a strong history. So let's talk about yourself. What drove you to be president of and to be involved with the Puerto Rican Bar?
Well, I served on the Puerto Rican Bar Association Board of Directors when I was a young associate back when I was working at a large law firm in New York City. But prior to that, I wanted to make a commitment. I'm a big believer in giving back to whoever gives me a roadway or a pathway to success. So beginning with Professor Luis de Graaf, who was a mentor of mine when I was looking to go to law school. At that time, ProDef, as you know, was offering LSAT, free LSAT courses. I couldn't afford it, and I remember him encouraging me to do that. I assisted on some ProDef matters at the time voluntarily over the summer. Moving forward, landed up working as a paralegal and then as an attorney, and going through the machinations of what life is like as a young associate, Latino associate, not seeing a lot of my Latino and Latina colleagues in large law firms. I felt very honored to be in a situation like that. You know, moving forward, at that point, when I served on the board, I was also the president of the Hispanic National Bar Association, which is a fairly new organization at the time that had different regions around the country. That's more of a national organization. I was the president of the New York region at the time, again, as an associate, which is pretty unheard of that, you know, an associate would be in a position of leadership. But I think it says, I mean, while it may say something about me, I think it says more about the lack of leaders, the lack of prominent people in positions of power that are Latina and Latino to be able to have the gravitas to serve in these leadership positions. You know, not to knock the fact that an associate serving as a president, but we should have somebody that has you know, more power and yield more power in that way. So I think that that's sort of a statement as to where we are in the legal profession. We need to do more. We need to push our people more. One of the things the Puerto Rican Bar Association does to this day, as you know, starting in 1978, we started the Scholarship Fund, where we've raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. We just had our gala this past September, at Tribeca Rooftop, where we raised close to around $150,000, $160,000 as part of the effort to give scholarships to law students that are committed to working in the Latino community and representing a Latino voice in the community. And I'll say Latinx for the purposes of trying to modernize myself. So no offense to anybody. I actually like to prefer this Latina/O, but I'll use Latinx for the purposes of our conversation. So that's my connection with the PRBA board, and the PRBA goes back many years. And now I'm in a position of actually heading the organization, following Jason Canales, our president today, to move it forward with regard to several of the fronts that are in play.
So let's talk. Also, we are, that's wonderful. What are you currently in private practice?
Yes. I have a private practice with a partner of mine that's called Cooper LLC. We have an office in New Jersey and New York. I focus on commercial litigation. We're both litigators. My focus is on suing insurance companies, which a lot of juries like to hear, because we're not the most liked profession in the world, but one profession that might be less than us are the insurance companies. So I always joke around about that with people. But I have a productive practice. I work great with my partner. He's a fantastic individual, also a supporter of the Puerto Rican Bar Association and Latino efforts.
So let's talk about the Puerto Rican community. I mean, well, first, before we get to the community, let's talk about your vision for the Puerto Rican Bar and the coming administration.
Right. So when I served on the Puerto Rican Bar Association years ago, at that time, Roberto Ramirez, Luis Miranda, they have a company called the Miram Group. They were and Kathy Torres, who also worked in there, they were running basically the Puerto Rican Bar Association in various capacities. We used to meet at their offices. It was it was an organization that did things, right? We did things, and there was a political aspect to it, because most things in life are political. I don't think you can be a bar association and avoid the political aspects. It's about how to take a position without necessarily compromising the position as a bar association, and that was the lead back then. That was the cause that we had back then. We did important things. We helped promote Sonia Sotomayor to become Justice of the Supreme Court. Roberto especially was influential as the head of the Bronx Democratic Party as well, in placing a lot of Latinos and Latinas in judicial positions around the state, but not enough. And that's still an issue today. Whether we wanted, we could go on and on talking about what happened to Judge LaSalle last year with Governor Hochul as a part of political gamesmanship. I don't think we have the time to discuss that now. But I think
that's another show.
Right, I know, that's another show. I think what the PRBA needs to do is it's sort of over the past few years become I would say a solid, a very well reputed stepping stone for people who want to become judges. Okay, and that's an important aspect of the Puerto Rican Bar Association. We sit on judicial task force. We're part of we have members that sit on judicial screening committees, but it's not just about that, right? It's not just about becoming a judge. It's about more than that. And so what I want to do is take the organization going forward and exploring how we can make inroads into the private sector, how to place young attorneys that are Latina to work in large law firms, to work in prominent law firms. I had the privilege of sitting on just as an example, if I'm talking too much, you stop me. I sat on the recruiting committee for this large law firm on Park Avenue. And as you know, the way that works, for summer associate positions, they would only screen and take the creme de la creme, right? The top students at the top law. So they had that gravitas to do that. Right. While sitting on that committee, I pushed for saying, you know what? There are issues unique to the Latino community Okay, whether it's a language barrier or otherwise, or just a familial barrier, because students aren't encouraged to necessarily leave the home. Mothers and fathers want their kids closer to home because we're a close knit family. I mean, these are genuine issues in the Latino community where students may not go to a better school somewhere. They may go to a lesser law school, a local law school that doesn't have the gravitas, but they're going to finish at the top of their class. And we need to focus on getting those students, interviewing them and seeing if they could, if you find them worthy of working here as a summer associate. And to their credit, they agreed, and we hired someone from Pace Law School, I believe, that summer, and someone from another law school I can't recall. Not top-notch law schools, no knock to Pace or anything, but they're not the Harvards and Yales. And these two people were hired, and I remember a partner on the committee stopping by my office after about a month of them working into it. He knocked on my door and he said, you are 100% right. These kids, that both of them were working really hard. They really honored their job, and they're some of the best young associates I've ever worked with. And that to me says everything, right? So yeah, but it's the knowledge of how these things work inside these firms. That knowledge that I've been exposed to, that we need to take advantage of and push and get. We just have to open their eyes that it's not just about the creme de la creme. So that's one example. There's other issues I want to address: increasing membership, taking a position with regard to the status of Puerto Rico, but being careful about how to do that, because they're ultimately the ones that have to decide that issue.
So that our listeners, because they're in Chicago and in Puerto Rico, and our target audience for this podcast is not necessarily Puerto Ricans. It is really everyone, because of the purposes that I will discuss in a few moments. But I think it's important for people to get the overall picture, because you mentioned Roberto Ramirez, and I can date myself, because when Roberto was first starting in business, I was a partner in the law firm of Peter Rivera, right? And Rivera and Suarez.
His son is a good friend of mine. Yeah.
And we were really trying to make history, because following up on what the Puerto Rican community was doing. And it's a history of migration and fighting for civil rights, fighting for representation. And so that back behind it, that continues to have both at local government and in the private sector, to get the respect and integrate ourselves while maintaining our individual cultural heritage, not having to abandon the cultural heritage in order to be a full American, but actually adding to the fabric of what is Americanism while maintaining our background. And that becomes a struggle, and that becomes a civil rights struggle, which is still to this day going on, and every one of our communities, whether it's Chicago, New York, or Florida, is in that struggle. Puerto Rico doesn't have that identity problem. Of course, they're in Puerto Rico. And so, and they control the judiciary and the bench and the government and everything else. But when you're outside of that, it becomes a struggle. And each community has adapted to each way of having to deal with that. And so now with this administration, and 57 in 1957, now you're 67th president. That's a long history, a long tradition that it's wonderful to maintain, but hard to keep the momentum going, because communities change, which leads a segue to the next segment: is how has the community changed? And let's start with the fact that we know that the West Side Story part of New York, a Puerto Rico story, that was a real story. My parents lived that story. Okay. They lived that story, that migration, the whole thing with the gangs and trying to take over a section of a barrio for self-protection and so forth. Then we started getting some representation in Albany and some representation in City Hall, but that required a lot of litigation. That's when the Puerto Rican Bar was born, and later on the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund. But the community has continued to strive. We have many legislators now. We've had many city councilmen. We've not had a mayor yet, okay, but we've had lots of representation, and the community has grown and prospered over the years. So it's the most matured, I would say, most matured Puerto Rican community outside of the island. And so the question is, what's the status? Where is the Puerto Rican community today? We're not concentrated in a barrio. I know that from anecdotal evidence, but you live there now. So, and I've been out of there since 1991. So tell me, what's it like? How's it migrated? How's it changed?
Right. So it's a fascinating conversation to have, and that's a conversation we can go on forever about. I believe you had an interview with one of our great members, Peter Rivera Jr. Okay. And I was speaking to Peter, to be honest, in preparing for this podcast, asking what to expect. He complimented you highly, so don't worry about it. But Peter and I were having an interesting discussion about the issues facing Puerto Ricanos in New York City today. And it seems like it's the same issue. And it's sort of, you have this twofold effort. You have, one is the declining representation of Puerto Ricanos, just our people in city government as judges, because of what I believe to be in large part assimilation. While there's immigrant aspects to the movement of Puerto Ricans in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. It wasn't exactly the same because we're born as U.S. citizens. So it's easier for us on some level, arguably, and I've seen it in my own family, to assimilate with other cultures and other people. You have that is something that separates us. So as a result, what happens? You have someone, for instance, like Peter, who now lives in Rockland County. You have some members of ours that live in upstate New York. So it's spread out. And you have, as you mentioned, Chicago and around the country. That wasn't the case when my parents were younger. Basically it was the Grand Concourse, and pretty much if you come across another one, it works, right? So I think trying to, you could do one of two things. You could try to create the national effort of a Puerto Rican voice, which, to your credit, you're trying to do, or not. It's not an either or, but by simultaneous with that is understand sort of the way the Pro-Def changed their name to Latino Justice. They changed their name to Latino Justice because of declining Puerto Rican representation. Maybe it's because of the success of Aspira, which established Board of Education, established bilingual education in the Board of Education, or other efforts. The population of who they represent and the monies coming in started dwindling, so they had to broaden their voice. They had to broaden their representation, and that's why they're called Latino Justice Pro-Def to this day. I think they're celebrating their 50th year today. So I think that issue is still at play today. So that's the Puerto Rican Bar Association. We're seeking to do the same. We're seeking to expand our voice. And one of the questions I get all the time is like, can I serve on the Puerto Rican Bar? Can I be a member? I'm not Puerto Rican. I said, it's okay. You don't have to be. But as long as you understand some of the uniqueness of the issues that are truly, Puerto Rican, they overlap sometimes with Dominican cultures, Cubano, whatever, but sometimes they don't. And one perfect example is the status of the island down in Puerto Rico.
It's interesting you should mention that because last week I interviewed Roger Maldonado, who is the president of the City Bar of New York, which back in my time when I was a practicing attorney in New York City, you couldn't even get into the bar.
No.
You couldn't even get into that bar, so much less become the president of the City Bar of New York. Yes. And now we have a Puerto Rican who is the president of the City Bar of New York. That's really an amazing transition.
Yes.
Certainly, just within my lifetime, that has been an incredible transition. And of course, like almost everything in the history of America, New York has been always leading the way on these kinds of issues. Which then leads us to the next segment, which is this question of the question that unique issues facing Puerto Ricos, because that is unique. We are unique among all the Latino cultures in America because immigration is not our obsession. And back in the 1980s, when I was president of Bar New York, the issue was, should we change our name to the Hispanic and just become part of the Hispanic Bar Association? Back then, I opposed that precisely because we are unique, and we would be engulfed in the issue of immigration if that were the case. If we were to give up our unique identity, because there is still a question in American history that Puerto Rico is not treated equally. And thus that becomes unequal treatment, unfair treatment, and that resonates throughout the history and our relationship. So now we've, and in that light, after so considering so many different things about the Puerto Rican community, I realized that we need to have a place, a national platform, in order to discuss this issue, not to take a position for Puerto Rico statehood or for Puerto Rico independence or any particular option. Let the people of Puerto Rico decide that ultimately. But Puerto Ricans cannot decide that. Puerto Ricans do not have the power to decide that, because while they are citizens and making us different than other Latinos born in Mexico or South America or Central America, we do not have the ability to vote our future. In the meantime, we can get drafted. We have been sent to fight the war for democracy for Vietnamese and Koreans and Europeans and Afghanistan, Iraq, and everybody else. They could put the purple thumb up, but the Puerto Ricans cannot put a purple thumb up. And so how is this consistent? And that issue is a current American issue, meaning that we have, and not me, I don't say it, Supreme Court of the United States has said, Puerto Rico is a territory governed by a territorial clause. The 14th Amendment does not apply equally in Puerto Rico as it applies in the rest of the United States. So that we have brothers, 3.5 million Puerto Ricans on that island who cannot display the future. And so with all the crises they have, whether you like their politics or not, that's not the issue. Whether you like their politics or whether there's corruption or there's wrong things and they're irresponsible, you can say a whole bunch of stuff. But the basis of the American legal system is an equality under the law. And if we can't fight for that, then I don't know what we have for, or why we should even call ourselves Puerto Rican Bar Association. We can't fight for that,
Right.
So
Right.
so the question is, can we develop a national platform without getting involved in the minutia of what the preferred status is? Because ultimately, that's for the people on the island to determine. Many have determined, like my grandfather decided, I'm going to move to the States. Or he voted with his feet. And many Puerto Ricans, in fact, statistically, we have 5 million Americans who identify themselves as Puerto Rican on the census. So there are more Puerto Ricans on the mainland than there are Puerto Ricans on the island. But nonetheless, they've chosen to be in Arkansas or Texas or wherever you are. You're right. So that's you participate in that state election, and the Puerto Ricans on the island have to. But we on the mainland have to be able to mobilize in order to give them the opportunity to be able to vote, because otherwise they won't have it. So with that sense, this message or this mission is outside the Puerto Rican community. It will not be determined by the Puerto Rican community. It must be determined by people in Utah and Wyoming and everyone else that has a senator or congressman that has the ability to control whether or not Puerto Rico ever gets this chance. And so the purpose of this conference is, of course, to bring influencers, people who, in this case, we have professors, law professors. We have 11, this particular year, we have 11 workshops. Some are CLE for lawyers, others are generalized, like demographics of Puerto Rico. We have professors discussing those kind of issues. Very wide educational process, open to everyone for free. Because if you're a lawyer, you have to pay for your CLE. Right. But other than that, everybody else is free. Because we realize we have to bring people to the conference. And so that is one of the purpose of this podcast and its continuing effort to create a national platform. And in this past year, as I've gone around talking to the presidents of the different bars, the concept is that we would eventually build it up so that it can pass along to different states as states feel comfortable feeling they could do it. If we can, in my opinion, if we can get the New York, Puerto Rican Bar and the city bar and the New York State Bar involved, they've got the resources, to be able to put something together and fly in experts from the UN, and to talk about these kind of issues. It really would be fantastic. And we have a national moot court that we did when I was president of the Puerto Rican Bar, Florida. We did a moot court competition on the 14th Amendment. issues that we brought people from New York, Chicago. We had competition at 3 different sites, and it was exciting to do. And we're expanding the concept about Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican, and the purpose of a Puerto Rican Bar Association, just like the Hispanic Bar Association and his purpose and its immigration. So, this is what we're trying to expand. And I know that you've had discussions with your board as to eventually join in this effort. I know that Jason Canales, who's the current president, indicated to me in my interview with him that they will sending us a letter of support. So that'll be good. That'll be good for us to read at the City Hall. Our first meeting Thursday night this coming week is at City Hall, where the mayor of the city of Orlando will be receiving us in City Hall. And the next day, on Friday night, the mayor of Orange County, Orlando is sitting within Orange County, and the mayor of Orange County will be welcoming us to the event. And all of this will be done at the Florida A&M Law School, which is in downtown Orlando. So it's a great event. I look forward to having this year, and looking forward to handing the baton to the next generation. Need to find some young blood, because 71 years old, Ray, 71 years old, and I'm still here plugging away, doing all these things. But I enjoy it because it's a passion, and like you have a passion. Otherwise, you don't need to be doing this. You have a practice, you have a business, you have a family, and you're doing this because the love you have for the law, the love you have for the community, the whole thing of calling yourself Puerto Rican means something to you as it does to me, even if we don't live on the island. So, thank you for this opportunity to explain to us what's going on in Puerto Rico. Something you would like to add about your effort?
Sure. Just real quick, I had the honor of serving on the New York City Bar Association Puerto Rico Task Force to address this, and we actually drafted a letter to Lydia Velasquez and AOC on that issue. But unfortunately, it was regard to a bill back then on the plebiscite vote. The bill keeps on sitting there. I know that Governor Pierluisi supports a bill where we finally, to me, look, I'll just leave you with this. The reason why nothing's been done is because nobody wants to call a spade a spade. In other words, Puerto Rico is a colony.
Right.
This Commonwealth nonsense is exactly what it is. It's nonsense. You want a Commonwealth, you can go to Pennsylvania, Kentucky. Those are Commonwealths. Puerto Rico is not a Commonwealth. That's a euphemism for what it really is. And once we address the fact that it's a colony, and we just become transparent about it, then I guess maybe whether it's an embarrassment factor or otherwise, we can address the plebiscite vote in the proper way. And there is actually a law to support that they have the right to assert their independence or join a statehood, whatever it is. But it should be one or the other. This middle ground just doesn't work. My father served in the Korean War.
Yeah, it's like I did a seminar some years, and I have you can't be a corteja. Will you marry me or not?
Bingo. And my father risked his life. He fought in the Korean War. The first time he saw snow, he fought in that war. He risked his life for his country. He is proud today to be an American. This is not a political issue, in that sense. Puerto Ricans are proud Americans, but you know what? Whether they're statehood or independent, they're still going to be supporters of America.
Correct. So. That's correct. And this is an American issue, not a Puerto Rican issue. It's really, as Americans, have continued to maintain this dual citizenship, this dual status, this second-class citizenship, and that's what it is. And not because I said so. I said
the insular cases said that.
The recent cases of territorial clause. There was written just recently. I don't know the site off the top of my head, but it said it's a territorial government, and the opinion was written by
Kavanaugh.
Not by Sotomayor.
No, Kavanaugh. I don't know if he does the Madero case where they said that an individual that was collecting Social Security that lived in Puerto Rico couldn't collect Social Security anymore, which is mind blowing to me because my wife and I were looking into retiring maybe one day in Spain. Well, believe it or not, I can collect Social Security in Spain. Why? Because Spain has an agreement with the U.S. to permit U.S. citizens to collect. So that's amazing. Think about that.
Yeah.
You can live in Spain as a Puerto Rican and collect Social Security, but you can't live in Puerto Rico and collect Social Security as a Puerto Rican. That's just an irony that sort of amplifies the issue with Puerto Rican colonization. So,
well, Ray, thank you so much for being with us today, and look forward to working with you in the coming
yes.
year, in particular your administration, to promote our mutual interests. Okay, thank you so much.
Muchas gracias. Nos vemos.
God bless.
Okay.
Hi, if you like this content, please like and subscribe below. You don't have to be a lawyer. Just like to know what they know and how they know it. This is your place. Puerto Ricans are citizens of the United States but cannot vote for president or Congress. And only with your help will this colonial status ever end, one way or another.